Good morning and happy Sabbath, church family. And happy Valentine's Day. Usually when you walk through a store, you see heart-shaped balloons, heart-shaped cookies, heart-shaped cards, and big heart-shaped chocolates. Am I right? And usually people buy these items because they want to show the people that they love and care about them. So that's called Valentine's Day love, and that's what people usually do. But this morning, I'm not going to be talking about that kind of love. I'm going to be talking about the love that God can give us, His unconditional love. Amen. Turn with me to Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32. See amen when you're there? Amen. So this is the parable of the lost son, and how the father truly loved him. It says in verse 1, "Then he said, a certain man had 2 sons." So this is talking about Jesus explaining the parable of the prodigal son, and how a man had 2 sons, and he loved them both equally. Then in verse 12 it says, "And the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the portions of good that falls to me.' So he divided to them his livelihood." Now, the younger brother, out of the 2 brothers, he asks for the livelihood. And usually, if you ask your father for something like money so you can go use it, you'd have to ask, please or thank you. But with this, it says that he didn't even ask him. So he practically demanded it. He didn't ask for it. In verse 13 it says, "And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions with prodigal living." So it didn't take him many days for him to get packed up and to get ready, and he was gone. He went to a faraway country, he met some people, and then he just wasted all his money. Then it says in verse 14, "But when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in that land, and he began to be in want. Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him to his field to feed swine." So practically, he went and found a job, and he joined a citizen from that country, and so his job was to go and feed the pigs. Now it says in verse 16, "And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything." Now to me, it wouldn't even take me a second to not want to eat that, because in the Bible, Jesus told us that pig is an unclean meat. Now in verse 17, it says, "But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your servants.' And so he arose and came to his father. But when he was still a great distance off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him." Now that's the picture of God's unconditional love. Because if you think about it, if you've been walking around with pigs in the mud and you've been eating their food, you just have to smell bad and look bad. But the father had so much compassion for his son that he just ran straight for him, and he fell on his neck and kissed him. And that's unconditional love. Now it says in verse 20, verse 21, "And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and am no longer worthy to be called your son." But in verse 22 it says, "But the father said to his servants, Bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. And bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us be merry. For this is my son, who was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found. And they began to be merry. So even when he ran off, he spent all of his money, and then he comes back to the father asking for a job, he was still filled with compassion, and he gave him a robe, he gave him a ring, and he gave him sandals to wear. And they even killed a fattened calf. Now it says in verse 25, Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, Your brother has come, and because he has received him safe and sound, your father has killed the fattened calf. Now, to me, I'd be happy if I had a brother that came back after quite a long time. But it says in verse 28, But he was angry and would not go in. Therefore his father came out and pleaded with him. Now that's not quite the answer I get, because, yeah, I'd love to see my brother who came home. So it says in verse 29, So he answered and said to his father, Lo, these many years I have been serving you. I never transgressed your commandment at any time, and yet you never gave me a young goat that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this son of yours came, who has devoured your livelihood with harlots, you killed a fatted calf for him. So this is like the picture of you and me. We come to church every day, and we dress nice, we give offering, we give tithe, we listen to pastor's sermons, and we sing. But as soon as there's something, teeniest thing that we don't like, or if there's someone that we see at church that we don't really like, then that's when we're filled with jealousy, or anger, or hate. So it says in verse 31, And he said to him, Son, you were always with me, and all that I have is yours. It was right that we should be merry and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found. And that's the picture I'm trying to show everyone today, because no matter how much sin you've done or how bad it is, God will always forgive you, no matter what. And me, I know, like, as kids, you think that you can do whatever you want and you can get away with it, but when you grow up, then it starts to eat away at you inside. And even I'm only 13, it's like eating me slowly and slowly. That's why I always like to come here and pray to myself. Please bow your heads with me as pray. Dear Father, I want you to be with us today as we depart from church and go to potluck. Help us throughout the rest of this week and today as we, Lord, we love you, and that's why we're here, because whenever we have a sin that we need to lift up to you, we know that you can always forgive us for it. Amen.